basketball, as confusing as that is. Why is basketball so important? I'm not exactly sure, but it's really, really important. Did I forget my drink? I came all the way up. Oh, there it is. Okay, without my drink. Basketball is really important to social identity in Indiana. I mean, you've seen the movie Hoosiers, or if you haven't seen the movie Hoosiers, it is an iconic movie as far as the people in Indiana are concerned, as strange as that may seem. So they identify with the game of basketball. And it's part of our social identity. We all identify with different groups. And I don't know what high school you went to, but I'm sure you identified with the people at your high school. No matter when it was. It didn't have to be last week, as in the case of some of us in the room, but it might have been a really, really long time ago, but we still identify with our social identity, with that group. Something really curious is that part of my social identity is that I'm a college professor at Diné College. That's part of my social identity, but it was really kind of funny. When I was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame, there were a lot of people that were just aghast because they couldn't believe an academic could also be an athlete. It was kind of bizarre. So the way people started talking to me and the way that people started treating me was completely different because my social identity had changed. And I don't know what's going to happen next. Academics don't like athletes. A lot of academics were picked on by athletes, or the athletes were given accolades just because of their athletic prowess. So the academics felt like they were being denigrated, or they were being forgotten. I mean, athletes get athletic scholarships, and so what do academics have to do to get a scholarship? Well, they have to really bust their tails. But the reality is, of course, an athlete has to bust their tail as well. Sometimes, some athletes are just natural. I was not. I wasn't a natural athlete. Anyway, so that's part of my social identity, and things have changed. Things have changed around here. They put that thing up on the home page, and there was my picture, and every time you clicked on the home page, you saw my picture of me scared to death with my plaques in front of me. Anyway, that has become part of my social identity, and people have greeted me. Everybody knows my name now. Damn it! And they never tell me who the hell they are. So all these people keep coming up to me and saying, "Way to go! Congratulations! What was that?" You know, usually they say, "What was that?" Of course, the thing made it sound like I was in the Indiana Athletic Hall of Fame, which wasn't true at all. You guys know the truth, okay? But that's okay. Anyway, that's become part of my social identity. It's really kind of curious how things have changed. As an academic, they treat me one way, but as an athlete, it's not the same. It's not exactly the same. John Turner and Henry Togschwell see people categorizing themselves, identifying ourselves with our in-groups, and comparing ourselves with our out-groups. So no matter where you went to high school, the people that you went to high school with were your in-group. They're the ones that told you how to dress. They're the ones that dictated how you would act. So you didn't act differently than the people around you, because if you did, you'd be rejected. And normally in high school, especially in junior high school, everybody wants to look the same, everybody wants to act the same. They want to use the same words. So there may have been a word, and Colty and I were using a word last night.
Oh yeah.
That I had never heard before. And I don't know where the hell she came up with it, but evidently this is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess.
So don't ever grow one of those.
If I ever grew a mustache, it would not look like that. So that would have to be something else. However, when I first married my current wife, I did have a mustache, but it came in red. I mean, I had a red mustache, which is ugly. And it wasn't very thick, but she wanted me to keep that mustache because she wanted me to look like Tom Selleck, which is never going to happen. For one thing, he's tall. The other thing, he's hairy everywhere, not just on his face. And his mustache was much thicker than I was. I was in the Air Force, so I had to cut it off here, and I've got a small mouth, so it looked like a Hitler mustache. I mean, it's really attractive. Anyway, so we are told how to act and how to look by the people in our in-groups. And luckily, Freddie Mercury is not in my in-group. And we compare ourselves with outgroups. Who's the Momoa? Jason Momoa? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. He's in my outgroup because he's Hawaiian for one thing, and he's got hair like everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, and he's a lot better looking than I am. In-group bias, the mere process of identifying yourself, sets up a categorization process of creating groups of who we are, us, and who we are not, and that's them. We do this, you guys do this with other tribes. Somebody was talking to me the other day, and he started talking about Hopis. He started talking about Hopis. Evidently, they've got round heads. I didn't know this. They've got round faces, and they do really weird things. I don't know. It was just really a strange conversation.
I noticed that about Utes. They're small.
Who are?
They're small Utes.
Utes are.
They're smart. They're small.
Not very attractive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Shh. But we can't say that.
The video.
I'm sorry?
The video.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can hear you. Huh? I can hear you. I whispered, I think. I don't think. I'm hoping you didn't pick it up. I've lived a lot of different places where there are a lot of different tribes. And they always make fun of each other, which is kind of fun, as long as they're making fun of each other. As long as they're not serious. But and those are the them, and of course whatever you are is the us. They used to make fun of crows up in Montana. Everybody does. Everybody makes fun of the crows.
Why?
Because the crows were always the scouts for the cavalry.
Right.
And you can take that one to the bank. They were always the scouts. And of course, most of the groups up in Montana, the Cheyenne and Sioux especially, were, of course, they were the ones that defeated Custer at the Little Bighorn.
You lived with them?
So you've got all these Sioux and you've got all these Cheyenne, and everybody hates the Crows. But even if they weren't hostile to the American government, they still have an antipathy towards the Crows. So they make fun of them all the time. But actually they're taller and better looking than just about everybody. I can put that one on that. They are.
She's going to rip you apart.
They're so tall. Yeah, they're really tall. Good basketball players too. Blackfeet are good basketball players.
I've never met, I have her right now.
For sure you have.
Yeah, I was like, I like it. I know her.
A Blackfeet.
I know her. But...
She's kind of short for a Blackfeet.
Really? Maybe
Oh yeah.
Didn't she say she's half?
Yeah, she's part Mexican. Blackfeet women are tall. They're really tall and slender. Just really tall. And the guys are even taller than the women, of course. They were all buffalo hunters. So they had to be big, had to be tall. So that they could stab down on it. Anyway. Natural reaction to maintaining an in-group bias, the tendency to favor one's own group over any competing group, and of course that's Well, what were you saying back there? Okay. Studies have shown that people from individualistic cultures maintain more in-group bias than those from collectivistic cultures. And one of the problems we have in the United States is that we were very compartmentalized. So you would have a town of people from England, you'd have a town of people from Germany.
Oh, like Little Italy and...
Yeah, Little Italy, exactly. But that's in cities. Of course, we would have villages that were only German and only English and only Swedish and only Norwegian.
Oh.
And as it turns out, you would think that Norwegians, who speak almost the same language as the Swedes, it's a Scandinavian language, they're almost identical. These people hate each other. I know. Swedes claim that they can tell the difference between a Norwegian and a Swede because Norwegians have darker hair. Really? Come on. I've seen Norwegians with blonde hair. But it's really kind of interesting that they swear back and forth. I mean, these people really hate each other. As confusing as that is, I know, it doesn't make any sense. The British have always been dominant in the United States. So there are a lot of areas in the United States where if you're of English ancestry, then that makes you superior to anyone else. So if you go to Boston and you have an English name, then potentially that gives you a leg up on other individuals, especially individuals with Irish names or individuals with German names. I know, it's stupid.
Kind of like mathematics. You know, we have almost same languages, Hopi and Apache. They almost all sound the same. And we see we're different. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that. You guys confuse me greatly. Because our social identification, of our social identification, we conform to our own group norms. We sacrifice ourselves for our team. You'll do anything for your team, include, yeah, exactly. Your basketball team, your football team, your whatever. Your family, of course, you'll sacrifice everything for your family. And those of us who have been in the military, maybe we weren't thinking about it when we joined the military, but once we got into combat, we went, oh, damn, I'm going to have to. But, I mean, what's the other choice? The other choice is to not fight, I guess. We dislike the outgroups that we're dealing with. One of the things that has happened recently is that we had a shooting at the Waffle House in Antioch, Tennessee. White guy took off all of his clothes except for a jacket, went into the place and started blasting away. As it turned out, all the people that he killed were black. Well, 3 people were black, 1 was Hispanic. And the guy that wrestled the gun from him was a black guy. It's kind of interesting that they haven't really talked about the whole racial issue at this point. Why did he do what he did? Does he dislike black people? Well, we're not exactly sure. They seized his hard drive. They seized his computer. Now they're trying to figure out why he did what he did. There was another individual that up in Toronto got in a rented truck and started picking people off on the street, driving 70 miles an hour, and he hit people. He killed 10, I think, and he injured 17. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Mostly women, right?
Exactly. Oh, it's exactly. So when they looked at his hard drive, or when they looked at his computer, they found that he was a member of anti-women organizations. So he was trying to kill women. So we dislike select individuals. Sometimes it goes to extremes, possibly. We don't know about Ryan King in Tennessee, but we do know about the guy from Toronto. He didn't like women, so he was a member of an anti-women group. I don't know if he didn't have a mother, I don't know, didn't have any sisters. The stronger we feel toward our in-group, the more prejudicially we react to threats from another group. If you think about if you were a member of a team when you were in high school, your school rivals, the other team that you hated, yeah, and you did hate them, didn't you?
Yeah.
You despise
Still
those.
do.
Exactly, you still do. It's still there. So who are the bad guys?
Chinley.
Chin-Li, and you went
Tuba City.
Tuba City and Chin-Li.
Tuba City and Hopi.
And Hopi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you from?
Blue Mountain. Low Mountain.
Nothing?
I went to several schools, so I can't say.
Oh, you hated everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to both boarding schools and public schools, several high schools.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Because I had to follow my parents wherever they went.
Yeah, wherever they went. And they were always wandering around. Okay.
Yeah, wherever they were working.
Yeah. What's going on with people? Yeah, I can still remember I was at Ashford University and they hated St. Ambrose. And I still have shirts that say beat St. Ambrose or Ambrose sucks. Okay. I know. I taught there for 5 years and I picked up their prejudices. I hated it St. Ambrose. I went to Wabash. We hate DePaul. We hated DePaul. Can't even stand the word. I know. Just like Chin-Li. I don't blame you for hating Chin-Li.
Actually, I hated everybody who wasn't us.
Well, sure you did, because you were the good guys, and they were obviously not
Right.
the good guys. In-group bias is favoring of one's own group. This may lead to liking for the in-group, of course. Disliking the out-group, which is what? Okay, liking for the in-group and disliking the out-group. Out-group stereotypes prosper when people feel strong in-group identity and when we are with our in-group members. So just wearing the colors of Tuba City. You're from Tuba City,
I
right?
don't know.
Huh?
I'm not from Tuba.
Where are you from?
From Kienta.
Oh, Kienta. Okay. So what were your school colors?
Red, silver, and white.
Red, silver, and white. That's an interesting combination. Kiana, what was?
Blue and white.
You have on blue pants?
No.
And of course, Edison was everywhere, doing everything with everyone, I guess. That's kind of interesting. Bias created is from social comparison. My wife went to Georgia. Everything she owns is red and black or red and white.
It's
I
like
went to
beige.
Wabash. Luckily, Wabash's colors are red and white, so sometimes she'll wear a Wabash shirt. Anyway, okay, red and white. Ashford's colors are purple and gold. Purple. Okay. So everything's purple. Everything I have, half my t-shirts are purple.
So you have an Angus plum suit?
No. No, I don't. That's kind of interesting. The bias created is as from social comparison. The more good your group is, the worse that the out-group seems to be, of course. And if it is a school rivalry, then that's the way it works. One established prejudice is maintained largely by inertia. When the society accepts the prejudice, most people will follow the path of least resistance and conform to the idea. And this is the problem that they had in the South. You didn't have enough people. You had so many people that were conforming. That's the way they picked up the prejudice. They picked up the racial bias, and it was just them conforming to be like everybody else. I used to live in Columbus, Mississippi, and I had a neighbor, and she was just the sweetest lady in the world. She didn't hate black people. She just talked bad about black people. If an African American came to her house, she treated them like she treated everybody else. But when she talked, in order to conform with everybody in the community, she talked really negatively about it. She would not use the N-word, which she hardly ever used, but she wouldn't use the N-word in their presence, certainly. But when they weren't around, then she used a form of that word. It was very, very strange. Sweetest lady in the world, just the nicest person in the world. But in order to conform, she picked up this prejudice, as confusing as that was. Now, the reality was, I remember when this happened, a guy came to her house, a black guy came to her house. Of course, I was teaching at the time. I'm from Indiana, so I'm blind as I'm an idiot, okay? I don't recognize any of this stuff. So black people used to come to my house all the time. Most of them were my students. And she noticed that, but she didn't say anything about it. Well, one time, somebody who was coming to my house, she was 2 houses down, somebody came to her house who wanted to find my house. Normally, well, sometimes in the South, if a black man knocks on a white person's door, they get shot. You think I'm kidding, but it's not, it's true. Of course, and this was a big, tall black gentleman. She was living alone. She's a widower. And here this black guy knocks on her door. And she just went up to the door and treated him very, very nicely and explained that I was down the street. At one point, she lent her truck. She had a pickup truck that she used to haul stuff. She lent her pickup truck to this guy that just came to the door. This black gentleman that came to the door. She just lent him her pickup truck. She didn't hate them individually. She didn't like them as a group because she needed to conform to what other people thought. She was, like I said, she's the sweetest lady in the world, and she reacted positively to individuals. She just reacted negatively to the group. They will act not so much of a need to hate as out of the need to be liked and accepted. I don't know if, did anybody listen to Comey's talk last night on CNN? Really kind of interesting because in his book he talks about when he was in college he was a bully. As it turns out, James Comey was picked on because he, what was the reason? Was it his father? There was a reason why people picked on him when he was in high school. So when he went away to college, he was in a dormitory, and evidently there was somebody in the dormitory that everybody picked on, and he joined in. Here, this guy who had been bullied in high school, when he was in college, he bullied an individual that was an outsider or an outgroup person. And he joined in, and he said, sometimes I bullied him, sometimes I didn't do anything, sometimes I just stood back and laughed when something like this was taking place. And he said that the reason he did it was so that he would be liked and accepted. He used these two very words, liked and accepted. And that's why he bullied. That's why he was part of the bullying process. And of course, there are a lot of individuals that just go along with people. They know that it's wrong. They don't think this way, but they go along with the group just to be liked and accepted. And I don't have to worry about that because nobody likes me, and I don't have to seek acceptance. But there are a lot of individuals that are like this. I think I've told you that I'm not a very religious person. As a matter of fact, I'm not religious at all. And in the 1950s, that got you into a lot of trouble. I mean, you had to be a member of a church. So my brothers and sisters, I had five brothers and sisters. They kind of just pretended that they went to church like everybody else did, but I didn't. If somebody asked me, "Are you going to go to church this Sunday?" I'd tell them, "No, I don't go to church." And of course, they'd all be shocked. Oh, God, don't you want to be liked and accepted? You need to conform just like everybody else. All you have to do is say that you do this. I told you the story of Bible school. We have Bible school every Thursday afternoon. So it was like 3 hours in the afternoon. Right across the street, there was a church from the school. And so everybody went to Bible school. Except me. I didn't go. Okay.
I didn't go to Bible school.
But you were supposed to. See, everybody went. When I was in the third, fourth, and fifth grade, everybody went. I was the only one that didn't go. The teachers didn't like it because they had to they're not going to just leave me sitting in the classroom all by myself. They had to sit there with me. So they were kind of pissed off. So I made everybody mad. And there were individuals that picked on me because I didn't conform. I wasn't like everybody else. So I grew up a nonconformist, which is why I'm here, I guess. Studies in the American and the African South from the 1950s demonstrated that the more socially conforming an individual was, the more prejudiced they were. And of course that was my neighbor. She was socially conforming. Was she really prejudiced? No. She didn't seem to be. She didn't act that way. Social institutions, schools, governments, the media will bolster prejudice through segregation, a social norm of separating racial or ethnic groups. Schools will reinforce dominant cultural attitudes through the images in their school texts school text to and attributes reflected in their primary readers. So if we look at first grade readers, one of the things that we see, this is what I saw anyway, this is Fun with Dick and Jane. I can remember Fun with Dick and Jane, reading Dick and Jane. These were books that were written back in the 30s. There was Dick, there was Jane, the little girl was Sally, Spot was the dog, Puff was the cat. I don't remember Tim, but I remember Spot and Puff. Anyway, Sally was always raising her hands. It was the goofiest thing. There's the family. As you can see, it's an all-American family. Mom, dad, nuclear family. Jane's hair was more red, and Sally's hair was yellow. Was straw yellow. And then, of course, Dick's hair was brown. And of course, Dad had really dark hair, and Mom had almost blonde hair. Anyway, they had all kinds of interesting adventures. It seems like their hands were always out like this. One day, Sally got lost. She went someplace she wasn't. I guess she walked around the block backwards or something. Anyway, the police had to bring her back home. I remember that. I remember that story. Anyway, so this teaches you that policemen are good, and that and everybody's white. There you go. I hope you had better books than we did. But these were books written back in the 1930s to help you learn to read. Read, of course, people say, see it go up. Up, said Sally, go up. I know. Well, at least I learned the word up. Advertising will perpetuate ideas and concepts merely with the focus of their pictures. Back in the 1950s, we never saw black people on television. It wasn't until the 1960s that we started seeing African Americans on television. This is giving you a lot of interesting information. There were never any black people in advertising. Until, when was it? 2013, we didn't see any interracial couples on television advertising. And then all of a sudden we saw one on Cheerios.
I know now is John Lennon and Chrissy Teigen. They're really big now on advertising.
Okay.
Yeah. Just saying.
Not before 2013, they would pretend that they weren't really together, as stupid as that is. I know. Guess what is the least favorite cereal in the South? Cheerios. They knew that they were going to have there was going to be a backlash. But if you watch television today and watch commercials, you see interracial couples in almost all of the advertisements. You at least see African Americans and white people in the same commercial, whether they're married or not. It's really kind of hard to tell who's shacking up with who. But this is really kind of an interesting aspect. It's completely different than it used to be. Things are changing over time. We'll see what happens in the future. We can influence the way you think just by what we show you on television. And you're not even thinking about it. You don't even think about it. It just It's subliminal, it's more subliminal than anything else. But you take in the ideas that people give you. And of course, one of them is facism. Facism is where they show the faces of men, but they show the bodies of women in advertising. Or they talk about women's bodies in advertising. This is a Taiwanese advertisement. As we see, we can only see the guy's face. Can't really see his body. And that's Japanese, of course. What's the most important thing in the picture? Well, it's supposed to be the beard, but I'm guessing it's not. This is an advertisement for some kind of insurance. There's a guy's face. This is Katy Perry. For a while, they thought that Katy Perry had breast enhancement done, but there was an argument as to whether they were real or fake. So here she is making money off of her breasts, so strangely enough. You can't see her breasts at all. They're behind the pop chips. Anyway, Katy Perry. Thought it was fun. Yeah, she's kind of funny. She's kind of silly. I think she has blonde hair now.
Really short one.
And really short blonde hair. I think she wants to look like Hannah Montana. Did she have?
Oh, okay.
Here's a, I don't know, what is that stuff, that stinky stuff? Polo, anyway. Get to see his face. Is that the most important thing? We can't even see what his body looks like. This is Keira Knightley, Chanel advertisement. Well, of course, we focus on her face, but we also have the outline of her breast, and that's, of course, her body is the
Very
most important.
sheer shirt.
Yeah, extremely so. It's a good thing that strap is there. We'd all be embarrassed. We wouldn't want that. And of course, sometimes they just make fun of people. It's an old advertisement. I was looking for new advertisements, but you can't type it in there and get advertisements anymore. I'm not sure. I'll have to just keep looking for better advertisements. Frustration and aggression, the scapegoat theory. Researchers looking at the economic situation in the South between the Civil War and the Great Depression discovered that lynchings were more likely to take place when cotton prices were low and frustrations were high. So whose fault is it? Well, obviously the cotton prices are bad because of African Americans, so let's go hang one. That's only logical. The Germans were trying to figure out why they lost World War I. And there were a lot of reasons why they lost World War I. They ran out of guys, or they ran out of men, for one thing. But they needed to blame somebody. So you can't blame the German soldier, because you need the German soldier to fight the next war. So who did they blame? They needed a scapegoat, and they found one. It turned out to be the Jewish people. As sad as that is. And we know that this is the way the world works. We see it all the time. So who are we picking on now in the United States? Whose fault is it that we have been in an economic crisis in the United States? Who does Donald Trump blame? He keeps trying to write laws. Who does he blame?
Democrats.
The Democrats? We can't get rid of the Democrats. They're more than a third of our population. We can't just get rid of Democrats. No, he's trying to keep these people. Immigrants. It's obviously their fault. They take away all of our good jobs, don't they? I'm afraid that well, actually, my boss is Mexican. I know. He makes twice as much money as I do. We just hired him. I know. I guess Donald Trump knows what he's talking about. Mexicans are taking out all the good jobs. No, he's actually from, I don't know, Phoenix or something. It's not important. It's not important to me because I'm a Democrat, right? I'm going to get kicked out of the country anyway. But he's blaming the immigrants. So what's he going to do? Well, damn it, he's going to build that wall. He's going to build that wall. And he's going to keep all the drugs out, by God, and he's going to keep all those, that whole caravan of people from Central America were wandering through Mexico and being raped, of course. More rape than you'd ever imagine.
Aren't they up by Tijuana now?
Yeah, but they were never coming, most of them weren't even trying to come into the United States. They were trying to get the Mexican government to give them sanctuary. Most of them were. You know. There was like 1,000. He was acting like there was 100,000 of these people in the caravan. It was really kind of bizarre. Anyway, lynchings. Lynchings happened in the South, and I've got some pictures of lynchings that I'm going to bounce over really fast. And don't look at them if you don't want to. And of course, Travis looks up. Okay. Look away, look away. Okay. Lynchings. That one was actually in Arizona. The second one was in Arizona. During times of social upheaval, minority populations become readily available scapegoats to blame for a population's frustration. So when we have an economic downturn in the United States, who do we blame? Well, obviously it's the immigrants taking our jobs. Obviously. It's obvious to me anyway. I'm certainly all those psychology college professors are wandering up from Mexico to take my job, by golly. The defeated South targeted their former slaves, of course. The Germans, after they were defeated in World War I, at least Hitler blamed the Jewish people to the extent that he tried to exterminate the entire population during World War II. This may occur because when one group is frustrated, any success of the minority group is seen as adding to the frustration. So despite the fact that most of the immigrants coming into the United States aren't going to be doing the things that you want to do, they're not going to be taking your slot in graduate school, certainly. But it's somebody that we can blame. We need to blame somebody, and we're never going to blame ourselves. The Republicans are never going to blame the Republicans, and the Democrats are never going to blame the Democrats. Therefore, we have to find somebody from outside the political sphere to blame. This is a cartoon that was drawn of a Jewish man, and of course this is a pure German woman being tainted by that man with a long nose. Some more negative propaganda about Jewish people. Some more negative propaganda about Jewish people. This is really kind of an interesting one too, because this claims that Russia's not really our enemy. The United States isn't really our enemy. England isn't really our enemy. The real enemy is the Jewish money behind the war. That was the idea. So they became relatively deluded. Sometimes they didn't fight as hard as they could. They didn't kill as many Americans as they could. They didn't kill as many Englishmen as they could, because Hitler convinced them that it was the Jewish people, and it wasn't the American people that were the bad people, or the English that were the bad people. It was the Jewish banker behind the army, behind their military. As confusing as that is. So, I mean, they couldn't get to the bad guys, right? Okay. The realistic group conflict theory purports that prejudice arises from competition between groups for scarce resources. In the United States, the strongest anti-black prejudice occurs among people closest to the blacks in the socioeconomic ladder. And these are the ones that elected Donald Trump president. A lot of hate crimes have been taking place. The kid that shot up the school or the church, the white kid that went into a black church and killed 9 people, including the minister. And he was a poor white kid. In Canada, opposition to immigration fluctuates with the unemployment rate. So even the Canadians are getting involved. To perceive ourselves as having status, we need people below us. When our status does not allow us to feel superior, prejudice does make us feel superior. So we see individuals in a very difficult economic situation. Who do they attack? They attack the individuals that outside their in-group. They form very strong prejudices. And we may find out that Ryan King has a very strong prejudice against black people. Why he took off his clothes, I have no idea. He stripped down naked, put on his coat, green coat, and went in and started shooting people up. I mean, the fact that this guy is running around without any pants on should have given people a clue, right? He steps out of his truck without any pants on. That just doesn't usually happen. Not even in Antioch, Tennessee. Study after study has shown that when an individual has low self-esteem or has their self-esteem attacked, they are more likely to express polarized opinions that are more likely to reflect prejudice toward a select group. Research directly after World War II demonstrated that people who maintained prejudices against one group were more likely to maintain prejudices about other minorities. Really kind of fascinating. Most people don't remember this or recognize this, but right after World War II, we had a really serious problem in the United States. We had a Red Scare in the United States. One of the things that happened during World War II was that we were fighting with the Chinese, we were fighting with the Soviets in Russia. We were fighting with the Soviets, and after the war, everything kind of went south. So here are all of a sudden our allies looked like they were our enemies. The group that we tried to support in China were the Kuomintang. They were the nationalist Chinese. Well, in 1948 there was a revolution in China, and the Red Chinese defeated the nationalist Chinese, and the nationalist Chinese were kicked out or killed. Billions and billions, well, there are a billion people in China, and here we had the Red Chinese were taking over. What happened in Russia? Well, the Russians tried to take over they tried to take over Europe. And what happened was that they were only able to take some of the poorer Eastern European countries. So we were being confronted by the communists. So there's this huge Red Scare in the United States. So from 1941 until 1945, it was okay to support communism because they were our allies in the Soviet Union. But from 1945 until 1950, things changed. All of a sudden, things changed. And then in 1950, we started fighting a war against the communists. And that was the Korean War. So we had this huge flip that took place. It was more of an emotional flip, and it had to do with politics, strangely enough. So you couldn't be an anti-communist in 1942, but you had to be an anti-communist in 1950. So from the end of the war until the Korean War started, people in the United States were really confused. And so all of a sudden we had this movement toward hating the communists. And at that point, in 1951, they put, let's see, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. They put under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. Before that, under God was not in the Pledge of Allegiance. But in 1950, they put it in there because they considered the communists godless. That's stupid. So they put under God. So all of the kids who learned the Pledge of Allegiance all of a sudden started saying under God, where it wasn't even in there before. And this gets really weird, doesn't it? So all of a sudden there was this anti-communist movement that took place in the early 1950s. What had changed? Well, nothing had actually changed in the United States, but there was this new prejudice against communism. There was a congressman by the name of Joe McCarthy from Wisconsin, and he decided that he was going to rout out all the communists in the American government. So he started calling people the Un-American Activities Committee. He headed the Un-American Activities Committee, and he started attacking people. And he made people lose their jobs because they either were a member of the Communist Party or they had supported the Communist Party at some point. Of course, this was acceptable behavior back in the 1940s. So a lot of people in Hollywood lost their jobs. A lot of actors couldn't get work. A lot of writers couldn't get work. And they were blacklisted. And then he attacked the United States military, trying to rout out all the communists in the United States military. And that's when he lost his power. He was in power for 4 years. His committee was the strongest thing in the United States. His committee hearings were televised. And he would ask them if they had ever been a member of the Communist Party. And if they said yes, they lost their job. I know, this huge red scare going on in the United States. So it was a brand new prejudice after World War II, a new prejudice against the communists. So if you grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, there was this negative attitude toward anything that was even remotely communist or socialist. It's just bizarre. Ethnocentric people are people who believe in the superiority of one's own ethnic and cultural group and a corresponding disdain for all other groups, and that's kind of what I've been talking about as far as you guys and other tribes. And ethnocentrism. I don't understand it, but Kiana does, so as long as you understand it, I guess I'm okay. Ethnocentrics tend to share authoritarian tendencies, and if you look at your traditionalism, a lot of it is dictated to you. It's given to you. You don't have a choice. You don't get to decide whether you follow it or not. One of the more ethnocentric groups in the United States are the white supremacists. And this is one of the reasons why people got so upset with Charlottesville. It was, we're trying to support diversity. We're trying to support acceptance. And here all of a sudden we had a march in Charlottesville supporting ethnocentrism. I know. And of course the Ku Klux Klan was part of that. As lovely as they are, you can't beat their outfits. They look like nuns, I guess. I don't know. And the mask kind of sets them off a little bit. Those with authoritarian personalities tend to be intolerant of weakness. They believe in punitive outcomes. They are strangely submissive to in-group authority. They are harshly disciplined as children. They're predisposed to focus on power and status. They maintain an inflexible right-wrong way of thinking. It's either black or white, it's either right or wrong. There's no gray area, there's no in-between. So with the Ku Klux Klan, black people are either good or bad. Well, of course they're bad as far as the Ku Klux Klan are concerned. And the burning of the cross just drives me nuts because it doesn't make any sense. Why would you burn the cross? I just don't understand. I'm not very good at all of this crazy stuff. It doesn't make any sense to me. Research seems to show that while the whole spectrum of political belief can show prejudice, right-wing authoritarians tend to be equal opportunity bigots. They hate everybody. They don't like, and of course, right now the right wing seems to be in charge of the federal government. That seems to be Trump's power base. It's really kind of fascinating to watch because some of the laws that he tries to pass, some of the executive orders that he's signing, a lot of them are to support his base, his right-wing authoritarian base. The same can be said of people who categorize people according to their hierarchies of merit or goodness. Because of their staunch criteria, their social structure tends to be highly polarized. So it's either good or bad. And of course, one of the things that has happened in the United States over the last 5 or 10 years is that the news has become extremely polarized. Especially the right-wing news, the Fox News, has become very polarized. So sometimes you'll watch the news and you'll go, wait a minute, that didn't really happen. A lot of times it's opinion. and they present it as if it's news. So they have a lot of spokespeople, and of course they seem to be getting in trouble here lately. Sean Hannity is about the only one left on Fox News, and he has just gotten in trouble for various things. He seems to have gotten in trouble. So we'll see what happens to Sean. Bill O'Reilly was really powerful. Who else did they have that they lost? Well, anyway, they lost a bunch of people. Humans try to simplify a complex world by dealing with it in stereotypes. So the question is, can we keep this going until the 2018 election? There's a lot of polarizing things taking place in the United States. There's a lot of pissed off people in the United States. The kids seem to be pissed off. The kids are upset about gun violence, and they want something done about gun violence. But the question is, how long can you keep up your being pissed off? Will they vote the way that they're talking right now? They're marching. Actually, they had a march last week. Didn't they have a march last week? Not here, of course. But other places in the United States, they marched against gun violence. They want something done about military weapons. They want to take military weapons.
And the teachers locking out.
I'm sorry?
The teachers lock out.
Teachers walked out too. Yeah, but it's the kids.
No, it's for education. I guess they want to be paid more. Teachers.
Oh yeah, teachers are pissed off because they're not making enough money, especially here in Arizona.
Isn't that today?
Is it?
Yeah,
Are they
today,
walking out
tomorrow.
today? Cool. Okay, good. All right.
Are you locking out? Just kidding.
No, I'm okay. I make enough money.
I'm
just
doing
not-
our car for you.
Oh, they're okay. Thanks, Edison.
And I'm the only one that can fit in the car.
Well, yeah, only so. Well, you'll fit in the car. You're tiny enough. Yeah, exactly. Marius will fit in the car. He's not very tall. Okay, he'll fit in my car. That's kind of nice. Sarah would fit in my car. Christine would fit in my car. Sue's too tall. I know, she'll stick right out the top. Punch a hole in my moon roof. She'll make me a moon roof or something. So what are we doing here? What are we doing? Stereotypes, everything from car. Okay, so as humans, we stereotype everything. We try to stereotype everything. Ford just came out and decided that they were going to pull all of the cars out of the American market except for two. One's a brand new one, the other's the Mustang. Are they still going to have the Eclipse? I don't know. Evidently they're not doing very well. There's something that's happening. So they're pulling the Focus. They're pulling all of the Ford sedans. Except,
Because of all the recalls.
oh, they had a lot of recalls? Okay. There's a lot of Fords around here. I notice as I'm driving to Gallup that there's a lot of Fords around here. Anyway, we have prejudices. We have prejudices as to fast food restaurants. What's the best fast food restaurant in Gallup? Best fast food restaurant.
I don't go to Gallup.
You told me it was Blake's.
Blake's is on the way to Gallup.
Oh.
Blake's.
Try Freddy's.
Ready?
Freddy's in Gallup. Well, you don't go to Gallup, so
Yeah, like I don't go to Gallup.
you don't go to Gallup. Try Freddy's. If you go to Gallup, try Freddy's.
There's one in Farmington.
A Freddy's?
Uh-huh.
Okay, there you go. Try Freddy's in Farmington.
Yeah.
Have you
Freddy's
ever
is
eaten there?
I haven't. I tried the fries. They're really good.
Yeah, they put something on them. I'm not really sure. It's like watercress or something on them, or garlic or something on them. It's something weird. But they're good, and they're string fries. So those
Yeah.
little skinny things. Okay, and their hamburgers are just as good as Blake's.
Really?
The reason Blake's is so good is because they put more mustard on their hamburger. You can't go. Wendy's doesn't put hardly any mustard on their hamburger. McDonald's, and Burger King, but that's why Blake's hamburgers are so good, because of the mustard.
And the green chili.
I'm sorry?
And the green chili.
Oh, no, I don't. Can't eat that stuff. Burns a hole right through my gut. We stereotype everything from cars to fast food, so I don't know if you have a Ford or if you have a Chevy. You're either a Ford person or a Chevy person. I'm obviously a Miata person. I like to think of myself as a sports car guy. Without this form of categorization, we would be unable to make decisions or we would tend to make the same mistake over and over and over again. And we did. We bought a Dodge, and that was the biggest mistake we ever made. We dropped the transmission at, I don't know, like 23,000 miles. We dropped we had to get the engine fixed at like 80,000 miles. My wife hit her head every time she got in the car. We were not happy with our Dodge. But we're not going to make that mistake again. Okay, we've made that mistake once, but we're not going to do that again. Okay, so I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to give you a choice of 3 vehicles. You decide which car you want. All right? Are you ready? You can either have an SUV, a Shelby Cobra, or a pickup truck. Your choice. Shelby Cobra, pickup truck, or SUV? SUV.
Shelby.
Shelby Cobra. SUV?
Pickup.
Pickup? You have a pickup. You drive a pickup. Do you drive an SUV?
Yeah, pickup.
You drive a pickup. But you want the SUV?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you drive a...
Car. I don't know.
You drive an SUV?
Drive
Okay.
car.
And of course, we all
But I
know that...
loved my sisters.
SUV?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put all the
And
babies in
we
there.
all know that Kiana drives a sports car. Or you think of it as a sports car.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a little car. We find it especially easy and efficient to rely on stereotypes when pressed for time, when we're preoccupied, when we're tired, when we're emotionally aroused, or when we're too young to appreciate diversity. You come from a certain family. When I was growing up, there weren't any Japanese cars in the United States. There weren't any German cars in the United States. So you were either a Dodge family, a GMC family, or you were a Ford family. So you either liked Chevy, Ford, or Dodge. And my dad was a GMC guy. So our first car was a Pontiac. Our next car was a Buick. Let me see. I think we had Buicks for a really long time. And the last car he had was a Cadillac. He started buying Cadillacs. And they're all GM cars. He would never buy a Ford. He would never buy a Dodge. He had a Studebaker once, but they went out of business. Anyway, so we do this. We do things automatically. And we maintain our prejudices. We maintain our stereotypes. And we do this with just about everything. I stopped going to McDonald's just before we went to Japan. We went to Japan in '94. So I hadn't eaten at McDonald's for like 20 years. It's just a prejudice. I'd rather go to Wendy's. Then I got some bad food at Wendy's. So now I got no place to eat.
You got Blake's.
We got Blake's. And they're good hamburgers, but they're so slow. Oh, they're so slow. Have to take a break. I wouldn't call it fast food. It's kind of semi-fast food. It is common when seeing objects in a group to see them as more uniform than they really are. When this is done with people, it may create the outgroup homogeneity effect. So if you think that all Indians are alike, or if you think that all black people are alike, or you think that all white people are alike, then that is known as outgroup homogeneity effect. So you will stereotype. Yeah, I used to know this black guy and he was like this. So all black guys must be like this. If you do that, then that is known as outgroup homogeneity effect. If you assume that all Apaches are just like that one guy that you ran into in Phoenix, outgroup homogeneity effect. The reality is we're all different. Okay, no matter what. I guess if we're talking about traditions, then possibly that aspect will be the same. Perception of an outgroup as more similar to one another than one's own in-group is outgroup homogeneity effect. Individuals recognize their own group as diverse, but they see outgroup as all alike. So people that watch cops on television, they think that all black people act like they see them on cops. They think that all Mexicans are those shaved-headed people that they see on cops. Yes, sir.
That kind of reminds me of an experience that I had up in Canada. We were up in Calgary, Canada one year, and basically we walked into a gas station. We were fueling up and stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's a guy that walks in, and I thought he was from the SRC band, basically. And so at that point we were getting ready to check out, and he comes up behind me, and he basically speaks our language.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he spoke to me in our original language, and it was really surprising. It kind of knocked me off my course of action as what I was doing and stuff like that. But eventually, he was actually married to one of the Sarsi Indians up there, but he was originally from down in this area.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was really surprising.
Well, you know, there's a Dene tribe up in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
Sarsis are black.
I know, he gets fun now though, somewhere else.
Sorry, Sarsis are really tall. They're really tall. Yeah, really nice people. I'm sure he was a nice guy. But here so you assumed that he was a Sarsi.
Yeah.
A little bit quieter. Maybe not that quiet. Yeah, like Henri's quiet. When people feel bad, they tend to perceive people and events in more negative light. So it all depends on what your attitude is. People tend to see differences in faces of their own racial group, but they tend to lump people from other groups together as looking alike. This is known as own race bias. So I will see the difference between white people, but when I see you guys, I can't tell the difference. You won't look alike to me. Well, that's not true, of course. I've been here too long for that to be true. But own race bias is very real. So you may see all black people as looking alike. You may see all Mexicans as looking alike. Or, well, I don't know. This may be because the categorization process is delayed when looking at the faces of someone from another race. The individual tends to focus on the racial difference. And for this reason, if you're in a gas station and a black guy comes in and robs the station, you may have a very difficult time identifying that individual as anything more than African American. So if they show you pictures of African Americans, you may not have looked that closely because what you were focusing on was the fact that he was black, not on his facial features. You weren't memorizing his facial features, but if he were of the same race that you are, that would happen automatically. You would recognize him as one of you automatically, and you would concentrate on his face. And you would be able to identify his facial features. Very, very strange. And of course, everybody knows all Koreans look alike. These are Koreans. They all look alike, don't they? They really do look alike, don't they? That's because they're all the same guy.
I knew it.
Yeah, he's taken his face and put it on everybody else's shoulders. That's bizarre. And changed the hair, of course. But it's actually the same picture. Over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. I found that picture on the internet. I was so proud of myself. When people are surrounded by people of another race or who look different, they tend to stand out as distinctive. So a Belagan in the middle of a powwow would look distinctive. Yeah. Okay. We dress different. We dance goofy. I mean, we just don't dance right. We don't dance right. No, we don't. We tend to focus on differences rather than similarities. Distinctiveness allows us to categorize individuals. So we categorize people by their distinctiveness. And this is why when you were in that gas station and you saw the black guy robbing the station, all you could identify him as was as a black person. Because you were looking at his differences, not his similarities. Because difference is focused on the individual good and bad aspects of the individual, they are exaggerated. So we are looking at the differences between us. I can't remember why I put that picture in there. Wait a minute. Everybody in that picture is African American.
Except the white guy over there.
I'm sorry?
Corner.
No, he's black.
I mean, that's white. He's got white. He's got fine hair.
He's black. He's just light complexion. The one distinctive person in the picture is the lady, not any of the people. All the guys are black, as it turns out. If you could see him by himself, you would see. Comparing him with all the other black faces, he's the palest one. So you see him as white, but he's actually black. And if you looked at a picture of his face all by itself, you would identify him as black. Right.
His hair is fine.
Happens with black people sometimes. They don't all have kinky hair.
But it is wavy.
Yeah, that's possible. With Malcolm X. Malcolm X had very fine features, and he had red hair. How many black people do you see with red hair? Well, there's one right there. Hey, she's got red hair. Some Africans have red hair. Some people in Africa have red hair. Some tribes have red hair, as it turns out, or reddish hair. Okay. Who are these people? And they call them yellow skins because they're not as dark as some of the Africans are very dark, are almost black. Their skin is almost black, but this group has lighter skin, and they call them yellow, but it's actually brown. As we are talking about stereotypes and prejudice, it must be remembered that people vary in stigma consciousness. They may hold stereotypes, but they may not assume that very many people will fit into their stereotype. The reverse of this is that people who see themselves as the victim of prejudice will tend to see themselves as frequent victims. So it only has to happen one time. And it all depends on your mindset as to whether you start identifying yourself as a victim or not. So prejudice is very real. I've run into prejudice here. Kind of fascinating. Of course, I've been everywhere. Remember, I was a rejected person when I was a child because I wasn't a religious person. So I'm kind of used to being rejected, or it's not an abnormal thing for me. But I don't see myself as a victim because I try to rise above the hate that there's something wrong with me. Obviously, there's something wrong with me. It is normal for people to assume that when they do something that is negative, it is externally, situationally induced. However, when we see someone else doing something negative, very frequently they will assume that the act is caused by an inner disposition. And this is known as the fundamental attribution error. If I'm speeding toward Gallup and driving 75 miles an hour, the reason is because, well, for one thing, you guys told me it was okay. But the other reason is because I want to get to Gallup. Normally, I will drive as slow as I need to drive. I'm a good guy. I drive the speed limit. But, you know, I need to get to Gallup and get back again. That's why I'm driving so fast. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's because it's something that I need. It's internal. It's not external. But when I see somebody else speeding, I assume that they speed all the time. And they're a bad person. That's why they do it. Okay, and that's known as fundamental attribution error. Sometimes people from an out-group will do something that is as ethical or more ethical than one's own in-group. Frequently people will overlook this behavior as aberrant behavior for that group. And this is one of the things we're hearing about the hero of the Waffle House. This guy saw the guy messing with his gun. He wasn't firing, so he charged him, wrestled the gun away from him, was injured. And there were a lot of people that were going, oh, he's not really a hero. Oh, anybody will do that. Well, it turns out that the guy that did it was black. So there are a lot of individuals who don't see him as a hero because they don't see black people as equal. So this must be an anomaly, the fact that he did something positive. So they try to denigrate the fact that that he's a hero. Evidently, he's a double hero because he started a fund for the victims of the shooting, and he's already accumulated $150,000. I know. So is he a hero? Can you be a hero and be a hated person? Or somebody from an out-group? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. Is that possible? Can he be black and be a hero?
Yeah.
Not in the South.
Here he came.
Black people are the enemy in the South. They're seen as the bad people. Black men rape white women. That's the mindset. So can he be a hero? What's going to happen next? Will Donald Trump call him to the next State of the Union address as a hero? And will he stand up? Or will he reject him? Because if he does accept him, remember his base is the religious right. They have this interesting idea about African Americans. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays itself out. Will we see this guy again? Why aren't we seeing him on television as a hero? If you remember those two Air Force guys in France, the guy was shooting up a train, and these guys charged him and took the gun away from him. One of them was wounded relatively badly in the shoulder, and the other guy, but because he took the bullet, the other guy was able to wrestle the gun away from him and saved dozens of lives in France. They were both white, so they were both touted not only in France but also in the United States as heroes. And here we have a guy that did exactly the same thing, who's African American, and we'll see what happens. This is fascinating because I don't have control over this. You don't have control over this. It's the news media that has control over it. So we'll see what happens. Can black people be good people?
Yeah, do you remember when Amanda Berry was found, along with those two other girls, Michelle Knight and Gina Jesus?
I don't.
They were kidnapped in Cleveland, remember, for like 10
Oh,
10
yeah,
something crazy.
yeah.
Something crazy, and there was a black guy that helped them escape.
Right, and it was a white guy that was holding him.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, he was Cuban.
Oh, that's right, he was Cuban. Exactly. Okay. So what did we hear about that guy?
He committed suicide.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
The Cuban
Inside
committed
his cell,
suicide.
right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but the black guy that helped him escape.
He was all over the news, and he
Really?
Yeah, in I don't know, burger joints were saying he had free burgers forever.
Oh, my goodness gracious, you can't beat that. I have to look for kidnapped women so I can have burgers forever. Of course, my forever is not that long, so. It's not as long as your forever. Your forever is a long, long, long time. Okay, so, and this is the way it works, unfortunately. So we'll see how long this guy stays as a hero in the United States. We've seen him on CNN, but I don't watch Fox News, so I'm not exactly sure if they're saying anything about it on Fox News. It should be interesting. Frequently, people will overlook this behavior as aberrant behavior for that group. This is known as group serving bias. So for that reason, of course, his heroism may be overlooked by people in the South. I mean, he's from Tennessee. All the people, and they may rationalize it by saying, well, he's just trying to save his own people because, you know, they were all black people in the Waffle House. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be fascinating. At the same time, an individual might excuse the same behavior in their own group. Of course, that's what happened with and that's one of the reasons why we talk so much about good Samaritans. Most people don't understand who the Samaritans are, that they were despised by Jewish people, by the Hebrews, by the Israelis. They were despised. This was a despised group. And even though, since they are despised, when he did something positive, they overlooked it. And they also overlooked the fact that their own people walked right past this individual that was in need. And we talked about priests Remember we were talking about the seminary. And so they set up an experiment, and they had a guy that was moaning and needed help on the sidewalk. And what was it? 10%? If they had someplace to go, only 10% helped. And these are priests. They're supposed to help everybody. That's supposed to be the first thing that they do. And here, whatever they had to do was more important than helping this guy. That was the interesting part. But if they didn't have anything to do, still only 2/3 of them stopped to help this guy. That means 1/3 of them had nothing to do, and they still didn't stop and help the guy. And here, these are supposed to be religious individuals that are supposed to help. Okay. It's time to go. Next week, it will be no class. You will not have to meet at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you won't have to stay here until 10:20, because we're done. I've done all the lecture. There isn't anything on prejudice in the test, but it only covers up to chapter 12. I'm not going to change the test. Go ahead and take that test. That'll be the last test. So you get all this free time to do all the stuff that you haven't done yet.
Oh my gosh.